Let me tell you something. He didn't realize your worth while you were bending over backwards for him. He didn't get it when you showed up, stayed loyal, and gave everything. It took you walking away, finally choosing yourself for the light bulb to go off. And by then it was too late. This isn't about revenge. This is about reclaiming your power. If there's one truth that stings a little when you first hear it, but ultimately sets you free, it's this. You teach people how to treat you by what you tolerate. Every time you let something slide, every time you swallow your feelings to avoid conflict, every time you convince yourself it's not that bad, you're setting a precedent. You're silently communicating what's acceptable. And guess what? They hear you loud and clear, not through your words, but through your actions, or more accurately, through your lack of action. That relationship where you kept showing up, kept giving, kept forgiving, kept compromising. What you thought was love and commitment was actually training someone how to treat you. And here's the twist. They learned exactly what you showed them. They learned that you'd stay even when they were emotionally unavailable. They learned that you'd keep loving them even when they gave you breadcrumbs. They learned that no matter how many times they let you down, you'd find a way to justify it. They didn't change because they didn't have to. You adapted, you shrank, you accepted the bare minimum, and they handed it to you with confidence because that's what they knew you'd take. This doesn't mean you were weak. It means you were hoping for the best. It means you saw potential. It means you were loyal. And those things, those are strengths. But when misused, when given to someone who isn't emotionally safe, they become chains. And what's worse is that we start thinking the problem is us. That if we just love harder, if we just stay longer, if we just prove our value more clearly, they'll finally see us. But love shouldn't feel like a performance. You shouldn't have to audition for someone's attention, and you definitely shouldn't have to sacrifice your peace to keep someone else comfortable. So the second you said enough, the second you drew that line and actually walked away, you flipped the script. And it's not because you wanted to hurt them. It's not because you were trying to teach a lesson. It's because you finally learned one. You realized that tolerating disrespect, neglect, or inconsistency doesn't make you loyal. It makes you a participant in your own pain. You understood that staying in something toxic doesn't make you strong. It keeps you stuck. And the shift, it happened in you. The clarity wasn't in some big dramatic moment. It was in the quiet truth that whispered, this isn't love. This is survival. Well, you chose differently. You stopped explaining, stopped hoping, stopped waiting. You walked, not because you didn't care, but because you finally did about yourself. And that's the moment everything changed. When you walked away, they finally had to face the consequences of what they took for granted. Because when someone's used to you being there, no matter what, your absence shakes them. And that's when regret creeps in. Not because they've changed, but because they lost access. But that regret, it's not your burden to carry. You already carried too much. Walking away wasn't just about them realizing what they lost. It was about you realizing what you deserve. And now everything that happens from here, it's on your terms. They didn't change, you did. That's the truth most people don't want to admit. We spend so much time trying to get someone to see us, value us, love us the way we deserve. And when it finally clicks that it's not happening, something in us shifts. That shift is where the power begins. You might think they had some great awakening after you left, that they suddenly realized you were the best thing that ever happened to them. Maybe they did, but that's not the point. The real story is that you woke up. You changed. You stopped waiting for someone else to define your value. You stopped hoping they'd see you differently. You finally saw yourself clearly. In the beginning, maybe you bent to fit. You changed your tone to avoid triggering them. You held back your needs so you wouldn't seem too much. You told yourself they were just bad at communicating, or that they needed more time to heal. You rationalized behavior that hurt you, telling yourself that love meant being patient. You believed deep down that if you loved them hard enough, showed up enough, and proved yourself enough, they'd come around. And let's be honest, you wanted to be chosen. You wanted them to wake up and say, I finally see what I have. But they didn't, because they didn't have to. You were right there giving your best, waiting for their best in return, but it never came. And after a while, the pain of holding on became greater than the fear of letting go. That's when everything started to shift. Not because they changed, not because they became someone new, but because you did. You started asking different questions. Instead of how can I get them to stay, you started wondering, why am I trying so hard to convince someone of my worth? That question right there is a breakthrough. You stopped needing their validation to feel valuable. You realized that the very fact that you had to chase love meant it wasn't safe. You noticed that your peace was always second to their mood, and the version of you that tolerated it, she was tired. She was done. And when you finally decided to walk away, you did so from a place of strength, not bitterness. That's the part they don't understand. That's the part that surprises them. You were always the one who stayed, the one who forgave, the one who tried again. So when you walked, it hit different. They didn't change. They're still the same person. Maybe they throw out lines now like, I miss you, or you're the one who got away, or I've changed. But deep down, you know the truth. They didn't grow. You just stopped shrinking. They didn't suddenly become ready. You just became unavailable for their chaos. And the moment you walked away, they finally felt the loss. But not because they had transformed into someone new. It's because the version of you who tolerated their behavior no longer exists. You became someone who knows what she's worth. Someone who values her peace over attention. Someone who realized that real love doesn't require begging, proving, or suffering. You evolved. And that evolution doesn't require closure, an apology, or even acknowledgement. The only thing it requires is your own decision to never go back to being someone who had to fight for the bare minimum. They didn't change. They're still standing where you left them, but you're somewhere else now. And that changes everything. Your absence is louder than your presence ever was. When you were always there, texting first, checking in, showing up, forgiving, fixing, explaining, they got used to it. They got used to you being the one who held things together. You were the glue, the effort, the emotional support, the consistency. And because you were always there, they stopped hearing you. They stopped noticing the weight you carried, the little things you did, the quiet ways you showed love. Your presence became background noise. Not because it wasn't powerful, but because it was constant. They stopped appreciating the very thing they started to depend on. But the second you stopped showing up, that's when the silence hit. That's when the absence became deafening. And it wasn't because you made a scene. You didn't need to. You didn't have to beg, explain, or lash out. You just stopped. You pulled your energy back. You took your attention, your care, your time, and you redirected it toward yourself. That shift is powerful because when you remove yourself from a space where you were once overgiving, people are forced to feel the gap. And that gap, that's the space used to fill with your love, your presence, your loyalty. See, people don't always realize what they had while they have it, not when it's freely given. When someone's used to you being the emotional safety net, the one who never walks away, no matter how careless they are, they stop valuing it. They assume you'll always be there. But when you stop answering, stop showing up, stop initiating, they start to notice the quiet, and that quiet speaks volumes. It speaks of boundaries. It speaks of growth. It says, I'm done making myself smaller just to be noticed. They may not say it out loud, but they feel it. Suddenly they're replaying old messages, wondering where things shifted. Suddenly they're scrolling through photos, remembering moments they've brushed off. They might reach out. They might try to reconnect. Not always because they miss you, but because they miss the access, the attention, the emotional security, the feeling of being wanted. But what they're really feeling isn't just longing. It's the void left behind by someone who gave wholeheartedly and finally stopped. And that's the thing about emotional labor. It goes unseen until it's gone. And you were doing so much more than they ever acknowledged. You were holding space, being patient, forgiving, trying, believing in their potential. That's a full-time job. But the moment you stopped, they felt it. Even if they pretended not to, even if they acted unbothered, they felt it because your energy was never small. It was just taken for granted. And now you're no longer giving that energy away for free. You've learned that presence isn't about always being available. It's about being appreciated. It's about showing up where love is mutual, where effort is balanced, where peace isn't a battle. That realization shifts everything, because once you understand how loud your absence is, you stop offering your presence where it's not respected. So let them sit with the silence. Let them feel what it's like without you. Let the space you left speak for itself. You don't need to explain yourself, prove your worth, or chase clarity. Your absence is enough. It's the echo of everything you gave and everything they failed to value. Regret is their problem. Healing is yours. You might spend months, even years, waiting for that person to come back and say the words you desperately needed to hear. I'm sorry, I see it now. You didn't deserve that. Or even just thank you for loving me. But the truth is, their regret isn't your responsibility. It doesn't fix what happened. It doesn't undo the pain. It doesn't validate you in the way you think it will. What heals you isn't their realization. It's your decision to stop tying your worth to someone else's behavior. You can't keep bleeding for someone else's growth. You can't stay stuck in a story where your peace is postponed until they finally get it. You were already giving everything. You were already showing up. You were loyal, patient, forgiving. You didn't walk away because you stopped caring. You walked away because you finally realized caring wasn't enough to make them respect you. And now, whether they regret it or not, that's not your business. That's between them and their conscience. Your business is healing. Your work is rebuilding yourself from the inside out. You may never get the apology. You may never hear them admit they were wrong. And even if you do, it might come years later, long after the damage was done. But your healing doesn't have to wait for that moment. You don't need their acknowledgement to validate your pain. You already lived it. You already felt the weight of staying in a relationship that asked you to shrink, silence yourself, and tolerate emotional confusion just to keep the peace. So now the peace has to come from you, not from closure, not from regret, but from growth. Let them sit with their regret if it comes. Let them deal with the silence, the distance, the consequences of not showing up when you needed them most. But don't you dare confuse their delayed regret with your delayed healing. Healing isn't about them. It's about you remembering who you were before the heartbreak. It's about reconnecting to the version of yourself that didn't have to explain why you deserved better. It's about learning that love should never require you to abandon yourself. You are not responsible for their realization, and you are not the cleanup crew for their emotional mess. You're not the therapist they ignored, the mother they never had, or the savior of their story. You are a person who gave real love, and they didn't recognize it. That's not your failure. That's their loss. And while they may regret it someday, while they may finally see what they had when it's too late, your life can't be lived in the shadow of their time. Your healing requires space, silence, boundaries, and a whole lot of self-compassion. It requires you to stop replaying what could be and start focusing on what can still be. It means letting go of the fantasy version of them you created in your mind and seeing the reality for what it was. You were there. You gave your all, and it wasn't appreciated. That's not a reflection of your value. That's a reflection of their capacity. So while they sit in whatever feelings may come, regret, guilt, nostalgia, that's not your burden. Let them carry it. You've carried enough. Your job now is to protect your peace, rebuild your confidence, and move forward without needing them to understand how deeply they hurt you. Because the most powerful form of healing is living in a way that proves you didn't let their behavior define you. You rose anyway. You loved yourself enough to walk away, and now your healing is your own. Closure isn't something they give you. It's something you create for yourself. That's one of the hardest lessons you'll ever learn after walking away from someone you cared about deeply. You wait for the conversation, the apology, the explanation. You hold on thinking that if they could just sit down with you and be honest, if they could just say why they treated you the way they did, then maybe you could finally move on. But that wait, it'll drain you, because some people never give closure, not because they can't, but because they won't. And you end up stuck rehearsing a version of the story that's no longer real, waiting for someone else to tie up the loose ends of your piece. The truth is, closure isn't a conversation. It's a decision. It's the moment you stop needing their understanding to validate your experience. You already know how it felt. You were the one who stayed up at night wondering if you were asking for too much. You were the one who gave second chances, explained your heart, waited for change that never came. You were there, present, loving, loyal, and they were inconsistent, distant, emotionally unavailable. You don't need them to tell you that. You lived it, you survived it, and that's your proof. Real closure comes from accepting what happened without romanticizing it. It comes from being honest with yourself about how much you gave and how little you received in return. It comes from taking them off the pedestal you put them on when you believed they were someone they never proved themselves to be. Sometimes we fall in love with potential, with who we hope someone will become. And we get attached to that fantasy. But healing begins when you stop chasing that illusion and start facing the reality. If they were meant for your peace, they wouldn't have cost you so much of it. And maybe they didn't give you the apology. Maybe they ghosted you or lied to you or pretended nothing happened. Maybe they moved on quickly like it was nothing. That hurts. It's okay to admit that. But here's where you reclaim your power. You stop needing anything from them to be okay. You stop giving them the keys to your healing. You stop asking them to close a door they never cared about keeping open. Closure looks like waking up one day and realizing you're done explaining your worth. It looks like deleting the thread of unsent messages. It looks like walking past a memory without falling apart. It's quiet. It's not dramatic. It's not something you post online. It's in the way you choose peace over chaos, boundaries over access, growth over guessing games. It's in the decision to stop reopening wounds just to see if they still hurt. You might never get the moment you thought you needed. They might never look you in the eye and admit they messed up, but you can still move forward. You can still take your story back and write a new ending, one where you come home to yourself. You don't need their words to feel whole. You don't need their regret to feel justified. You don't need their love to feel lovable. Closure isn't about them understanding your pain. It's about you understanding your power. It's about recognizing that your healing isn't on hold just because someone else refused to grow. It's in the way you choose to live, love, and lead yourself forward. Even with unanswered questions, you are allowed to let go without permission. You are allowed to create peace in your heart. Even if they left chaos behind, that's real closure, and it's yours to create. And when you walk away from someone who doesn't value you, it's not about them losing something. It's about you gaining everything. You're not just leaving behind a person, you're leaving behind a life that asked you to be smaller than you are. You're shedding the version of yourself that believed it wasn't enough unless you were sacrificing your peace, your happiness, and your self-worth for someone else's comfort. Walking away is the most empowering thing you can do for yourself, because it means choosing yourself first for the first time in a long while. It means reclaiming the energy, the time, and the love you once gave so freely to someone who never truly appreciated it. In the moments before you walked away, there was a shift in you. You went from hoping for change, trying to make them see your worth, to realizing that you've already given all you can give. And that was the turning point, the moment you understood that the love you were offering wasn't the problem, it was their inability to recognize or match it. You stopped holding on to a relationship that drained you and started holding on to the belief that you deserve more. That realization changed everything. You didn't walk away because you stopped loving them. You walked away because you realized that love should never feel like a struggle, should never ask you to lose yourself in the process. Real love is about being seen, heard, respected, and cherished, not just when it's convenient, but always. You walked away because you understood that your worth was never up for debate. And if they couldn't see that, then it wasn't a reflection of your value. It was a reflection of theirs. And you walked away. It wasn't just a breakup. It was a rebirth. You stopped begging for someone to show you the love you'd already been giving them. You stopped waiting for them to step up and started stepping up for yourself. That's when things began to change in your life. You began to focus on your own healing, on the things that brought you joy, on the things that made you feel complete without needing external validation. Walking away created space for you to rediscover your passions, your power, and your peace. The change isn't immediate and it isn't always easy, but over time you'll notice that the person you've become isn't the one who tolerated disrespect or neglect. You're not the one who thought love was about staying in situations that left you emotionally drained. You're someone who understands that walking away from a toxic relationship is an act of self-respect, not weakness. You're the person who knows that love doesn't require compromising your soul, and you've learned that there is strength in letting go of what no longer serves you. You know, when they finally realize what they've lost, it won't be because you showed them or rubbed it in their face. It will be because they finally understand the price of their inaction, the cost of their failure to recognize your worth when it was right in front of them. But by then, it won't matter as much as it once did, because by the time they see it, you've already moved on. You've already built a life that brings you joy, a life where you are not just surviving, but thriving. The person who walked away is not the same person who would have stayed and fought for scraps. You have chosen yourself, and that choice will shape everything moving forward. Walking away is a declaration. You are worthy of love that lifts you up, not one that drains you. You are deserving of peace, happiness, and respect. And as you continue to move forward in your life, you'll see that everything you thought you were losing was never meant to stay in the first place. What you gain when you walk away is freedom. Freedom to be the full version of yourself, free from the emotional weight that once held you down. Today we've discussed the power of walking away. Walking away not because you don't care, but because you finally understand your worth. You've learned that closure doesn't come from another person's words, but from your own decision to reclaim your peace. You've discovered that your absence can be louder than your presence ever was, and that your healing is yours to control, regardless of someone else's regrets. You've realized that the moment you walk away, you stop waiting for someone else to choose you and begin choosing yourself, embracing the freedom to live fully without compromise. Remember, your strength is not in holding on to what no longer serves you. It's in the courage to let go and step into a future where you are valued, loved, and respected, not for who someone else wants you to be, but for who you truly are. So stand tall, walk away from what holds you back, and never apologize for choosing your peace. For when you choose yourself, you set the stage for everything else to fall into place. Let your journey be a testimony of resilience, growth, and the power of self-love.